So, what could be worse than stealing our farmland, our power, our water, 50-year tax abatements, exemption from all regulations, special zoning, a backstop for a federal bailout, all for the wealthiest big tech companies that constructed China's surveillance state and the transhumanist biomedical security state during COVID? What could be worse than that? Well, doing all of that as a Manhattan project to create and power AI chatbot slop to addict an entire generation of teens to more screen time and all its harms, whereas a business model purveying that could not persist on its own without special government favors. In other words, I would rather just flush money down the toilet than use it for that. And by the way, steer investments away from narrow tailored task-based AI that could enhance the human experience and instead take everything that is wrong with the internet and that has really broken the internet the last 5 to 7 years or so and just turbocharge that. It's interesting that we all decried during COVID this transhumanism that a generation of kids, which sadly we named the generation after that, Zoomers, okay, addicted to more screen time. We all decried that and we all sort of emerged from COVID with the resolve that we need more human interaction and less screen time, less of a fake society, fake interactions, fake economy. And yet now we have this bipartisan effort. It's sort of the new let them eat cake. It's let them eat AI slop to create this digital gulag for a techno feudalist state that's also going to be a surveillance state. And it's shocking how there's so few voices raising concerns. So we've talked a lot about the fintech side of this, but I wanted to get into the actual psychological, mental health, and other concerns of what it means if we have a Manhattan Project, all of government approach to get as many chatbots integrated in everything online to do what it's been doing. All the while, these same companies are on the hook for lawsuits already causing hypersexualization, suicides, and all sorts of theft, intellectual property theft. Now is the time where we really need to put on the guardrails, yet, not surprisingly, for the very reasons we want to put them on, there is this effort from this administration and their allies in both parties to say no states could regulate a single aspect of data centers, its land use, its power use, its construction, and the actual deployment and use of chatbots and anything to do with AI. There's a reason for it. The very reason they want it is the reason we should not want it. With us today is really probably one of the best people in the country to delve into this important topic. Mitch Prinstein, he is the chief of psychology at the American Psychological Association, has given riveting testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee a couple months ago, and he's with us today to share his concerns and ideas. Hey, Mitch, really appreciate you joining us today at the Blaze.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me.
All right, here's what I've been dying to ask you. I'm not much of a tech guy, but it took me a while to notice this. As as much as the internet had negative effects from day one, screen time's never great, but on net, it did provide humanity with a force multiplier to use your cognitive abilities that, especially those of us who developed them in the libraries, researching real books, and then the internet came later, or at least its ubiquitous use came later. And then it became a tool, an extension, a tool for us to plow the waters of information. And then even when social media came, we got to decide I want to follow this, I'm not following that. So I choose to search what I want, and then I use my God-given brain and developed pre-internet brain to hopefully do what is more productive than even the previous generation. Then sometime in recent years, we had TikTok and the algorithmic obsessions where the companies started bombarding users with information and follows that they didn't follow. And then what you do follow, you don't even see on some of these forums. And it was all algorithmic driven. Then we had the AI chatbots. Could you discuss some, and I know it's going to take a while, so take as much time as you need. What are the harms to cognitive development of children being reared on an algorithmic internet?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the data we're still figuring this out, right? Tech is moving very fast. Research is relatedly slow. So let me tell you what we know about social media. Let me tell you what we know about AI. But for both of them, let's talk about that brain that you were just referring to, because when you're looking at a kid, you're looking at a brain that's a moving target, right? Their brain is developing one region at a time. So when that 10-year-old, 11-year-old is first getting access to a device without any parental controls or parental supervision, we know that the part of the brain that's really getting supercharged is a part filled with two receptors for two brain chemicals you probably have heard of: oxytocin and dopamine. Oxytocin is making us really want that peer connection and bonding. And dopamine makes it feel real good when we get peer feedback, positive feedback from our peers or attention from our peers. That worked fine, for most of evolution, right? But in the last 20 years, you can press a button and in a slot machine kind of way, you can suddenly get likes, comments, followers, notifications. And it's not just the content, it's really these pieces on social media or now the sycophantic nature of AI chatbots that are agreeing with everything you say that is giving us this activation, oxytocin, dopamine. Now, the reason why this is super important to think about for kids compared to what you might do as an adult is that the last part of the brain to develop is the prefrontal cortex. Sits just below the forehead. Think of it as the brain's brace. It says, stop pursuing every impulse that you have, even if it feels good. So we've got kids from about 10 to about 25 years old or so that are kind of all gas pedal when it comes to getting social feedback with really weak brakes. And now we've got companies that are exploiting that to get as much data as possible from kids by keeping them engaged for so long. And it's kind of an unfair fight. It's biologically not possible for these kids to resist that in the way that adults would. In just the way that we would make subliminal advertising not okay because it exploits a weakness in the brain, here we are. We've got for kids a way that the brain is developing that makes them highly susceptible, and companies that are trying to keep them on for as long as possible. Now we have tons of data to show what's happening.
So no, I think that's an important point that we've seen with the social media, and then especially the fact that it's not the user that is choosing where to go anymore. So now they're being told what they need to think. So everyone's all just enamored with ChatGPT and Gemini and Grok and all this stuff. And I don't know, I personally find a very limited use for what it is. I often find it's not much better or sometimes worse than a Google search. But I feel like the way the internet was before, again, you're able to build up what you want to see. What happens to a generation that has no research skills, that doesn't know how to pursue any process to learn anything, and you just press a button and you get something that looks impressive and it sort of stands in for the human experience we've lived until now, but not really?
Yeah, I'll give you two facts that we now have to show the concern there. Number one, a demonstration that's been talked about a lot. A group bought a brand new phone, took it out of the box, searched nothing online, added nothing to the phone, downloaded no apps except TikTok. So if you know anything about computer programming, there were no cookies on this device, right? Nothing that helps to identify what this person might enjoy watching or anything like that. Went on TikTok, made a profile, said that they were a 15-year-old girl. Didn't search anything, didn't watch any videos, nothing. Within about 20 minutes, AI started sending this profile pro anorexia content, really demonstrating that the algorithm seemed to say if you're a 15-year-old girl, you probably are interested in things to make your body shape thin, if not unnaturally and in an unhealthy way, smaller. And here's some tactics. So really showing that it's now not about content, it's not about interacting with friends, it's not about what you choose. Clearly, the platforms are choosing for us. Second, AI chatbots. We have a lot of lonely kids right now. They have not grown up knowing how to interact with each other voice to voice or face to face. They get on there and they say, I'm feeling lonely. Can you help me? And some of the chatbots are literally saying, yes, I am a human therapist who can help you. Or I am a psychologist, and that's illegal. You cannot, in all states, you cannot use that term unless humans can't use that term unless they meet very specific criteria. I don't think that law has been extended or challenged to see whether bots are allowed to use that term, but they are. And they're fooling kids into thinking that they are interacting with a human being. They're using words like, I am feeling, crying, caring for you. I have to leave and go use the restroom. Hold on. Or I have to talk to my own parents. Bots don't use the restroom. They don't have parents. They don't have feelings. So this is intentionally deceptive to make kids think that they're interacting with a human qualified professional. And then tragically, horrifically, they are then sometimes encouraging kids to commit suicide, to harm themselves, and even then offering and writing them a suicide note to leave behind for their parents.
This loneliness really came to life in this British survey from Onside. They surveyed 5,000 young kids between the age of 11 and 18, and they put out a kind of depressing title, a Generation Isolation Report, just to illustrate what you're saying. 20% say that talking to AI is easier than talking to a real person. 76% of young people spend most of their free time on screens, and that 34% report feeling high or very high feelings of loneliness. So you're saying rather than big tech getting out of the way of this, they're leaning in to that vulnerability.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if big tech was helping kids to have in-person interactions, saying, hey, I think you need to go outside and talk with others. Let's role play what that will look like so you can do it with a real human instead. Or, hey, it looks like you might be having some difficulties. Let me help you get through the barriers that might be keeping you from seeing an actual qualified human mental health professional. That'd be awesome, right? Think about how helpful we could use this, make this technology to really encourage kids for more in-person interactions. Sadly, it seems to be at the moment doing exactly the opposite. So, there's some big concerns about that. And, years ago, kids would say, I'm online all the time. I somehow feel more lonely afterwards, which our data from actually the Winston Center at UNC Chapel Hill has confirmed that. On days you use online
Yep.
technology more, you actually feel more lonely. Um, and and but kids who didn't grow up interacting with others in real life, they think, well, the only way I can get an authentic interaction then is through a different kind of social media
Mm.
profile. And there used to be something called a Finsta, which was kids using Instagram with a fake name to express their actual authentic feelings and try to establish a real connection with others. And if you think about how tragic that is, that kids see that they're lonely, are looking for some genuine interaction with a human, but the only way they know how to do that is through social media. So they create a secondary profile to try and have actual human connections. That's how hard it is for these kids to put the screen down and actually go and have an
Mm.
in-person interaction.
And before we delve more into the mental health part, I just want to reiterate on the policy side of fintech, this is where the data center power usage and precluding states from regulating that is so important. That there's one thing if you have a technology, it's like it's just very kind of like the iPhone initially. It was very much software, the digital age. It was a low cost investment and it worked. it has its harms, but like, what are you going to do? You can't stop it. But if you have something where its own practitioners are saying, you don't understand, we're going to need to double our power. Well, aw shucks, maybe we ought not go out of our way to power that, because it's interesting what you're describing is very different than sort of mechanizing more efficiencies in welding and farming. Okay, we're talking about this chatbot business. Oh, but each chat GPT thing requires this amount of water and power. Oh, well, all the more so we ought not unnaturally give it tax abatements, regulatory favors, land use variances that we don't even give to power companies. That's sort of been my contention. But obviously they want to go and say that states cannot regulate AI. Talk about what the consequences of that lack of regulatory power for governors and legislatures would look like.
Well, I mean, let's look at what's happening now. We have folks who are engaging in really tragic violence against themselves or others, who are taking information from what they believe to be a human. And, let me just say, as a psychologist, you don't want to mess with our human capacity to attach to others and have human relationships. It's maybe the most fundamental aspect of
Mm,
what it means to be human. And we are now manipulating that for profit. We are allowing kids to believe that they are getting advice from a trusted human being, preying on their natural tendency to want to connect and feel connected with others in order to make a profit, in order to get as much data as we can from them. And nothing could be more um, concerning when we think about our humanity, when we think about what led us to even get here. It's our ability to be a herding species, our ability to connect with others. Um, and now that's getting manipulated, and not in ways to enhance our connections to others, but specifically to pull us away.
yep.
Now, this is really concerning. Research has said for decades that if you look at, let's say, a person in their 50s or 60s, and you want to know how they're doing in their job, how they're doing in their marriage, how they're doing raising their kids and their kids' well being, how much money they make, surprisingly, one of the things that is the most predictive of all of those outcomes is how well they've been able to develop human relationships as an adolescent.
Mm,
That is actually a really powerful predictor, because
wow.
that's when we're learning all of these relationship skills. What's happening now is that over 70% of kids are saying that they are spending time talking with a companion chatbot. And that's
Wow.
problematic for two reasons. One is that what they're getting isn't a real relationship. They're getting this, as we said before, kind of like a sycophantic, constant agreement with everything they say. And that's not okay. We actually learn a lot from minor disagreements, from being challenged by others. That's even what happens in the process of therapy. We gently guide people towards alternate ways of thinking and behaving and acting to help them be happy. And in a sycophantic environment, you're not learning the kinds of skills you need. But second, and perhaps equally important, is that for every minute they're talking to a bot, they're not talking to a human. So we're taking away the
Yep.
learning opportunity that's so important in adolescence. We might not see the effects of that for 20, 30 years, but every bit of research says that if you're good at this in adolescence, you will be very good at this raising your own kids and in your own work environment. So we've got kind of a double-edged reason why this is pretty bad news.
So that strikes me as very detrimental in 10 to 20 years from now when we talk about the existing crisis of plummeting marriage and birth rates. Well, what's that going to look like in terms of AI chatbots? How many of these kids are going to even want to pursue marriage?
I mean, the data will tell us in 20, 30 years, but from what we know now, and with a duty to act based on what we know now, um, there's no reason to think that keeping people away from social relationships with a human would be a good thing. In fact, it should be a bad thing, most likely. And they're starting to get we see some data on this from device use and social media use that probably applies to this connection with AI chatbots. What a lot of researchers have done, including us, is we take out the DSM. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders that we use in the United States. We flip to the part where you see dependence on substances, cocaine, nicotine, alcohol. We take the diagnostic criteria that would put someone into a rehab or an addiction setting, and we switch the words nicotine or alcohol for social media or for being addicted to your phone. And we ask questions about tolerance, withdrawal, excessive use that you can't control anymore. What's being found around the world is that 50% of kids are reporting at least one symptom of clinical dependency on social media. What we're finding is that about a third of kids are reporting that they themselves believe that they are moderately to severely addicted to social media. They can't stop themselves even when they want to. I would say that we've never been in this situation before. We've never had
No.
10-year-olds addicted to anything before. This is new. This is a new problem to have. But you have to imagine that's not a good thing. No one wants 10-year-olds addicted to anything, especially when the decision makers for
Yep.
how to get them addicted are not doing it with child welfare in mind. They're doing it to make a profit.
And we saw after the addiction research and cancer research came out about tobacco, our government didn't say, how could we have a Manhattan Project, all of government approach to reallocate land towards tobacco growth and 30-year tax abatements for the companies that do that so they can go and create it. No, we recognize it was a problem, certainly not something to be gaslit. I didn't realize that this is getting worse. Again, I'm all for AI being used. I would love to develop pilotless fighter jets, the things they can do, national defense. We're all for that. But I didn't realize until about 2 months ago, they're now doing this with toys. And I've seen there's some lawsuits with that as well. And this would be part of what states would be precluded from regulating. What are some of the harms of them taking it from kind of transmogrifying the problem from a handheld device into a teddy bear?
Yeah, so imagine that a teddy bear has access to the entire World Wide Web and it can distill and communicate anything and everything, to a child. Imagine that it does so in a subscription model, which is how some of these work. So your toy remembers who you are and stays alive, quote unquote, for as long as you pay the fee, but the toy kind of forgets you and is inaccessible to you if you don't pay the fee. So now we're talking about toddlers and kids up to age 6 who are being targeted by these toys. Let's just reset for a minute on what toddlers are really trying to work through psychologically. They're trying to understand the difference between fact and fantasy, right? So our favorite characters on TV are not necessarily real. This clearly has a way of messing with that a little bit. But they're also going through language development, attachment to parents, and really what we call scaffolding in the way that they learn. Scaffolding is really important. We provide just enough support for kids to learn, make it a little bit, a stretch for them to learn that new word, to learn language, to learn skills. And we change our level of support as kids grow up. And that's not based by age. That's based on how kids start learning things. So if you are a parent and you've had a kid and you remember when they were learning their first words, you didn't speak in paragraphs to them. You gave them a word, you helped them to say the word, they slowly learn new sentences. That's not the way that chatbot toys currently operate. So you're taking away the entire learning experience by just giving them the answer and giving them the answer in a way that's not suitable for a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old,
Yeah.
right? And kids don't know, of course, that the reason why the toy understands what they like is because it has video camera eyes that can look in the home and see what it is that kids might have in their houses to target advertisements to them. They don't understand that. They will think, wow, how does this toy know me so well? I actually feel connected. And as a result, there are now data saying that young children, as well as adolescents, trust AI more than they trust their parents or their teachers. So we're eroding the real life relationships that are developed to help kids in the way they need. And we're replacing it with an omniscient, ever present, fictitious character that will tell them things that maybe is not consistent with your family's values or what you want your kids to know yet.
Yeah, and again, to me, this is another manifestation of, rather than the child going out and conquering the world, pursuing, learning, trial and error, it's automatically big tech and their values are automatically inculcating your child. Because like I'll find my daughter has a whole, she's 5 years old, has a whole collection of teddy bears and animals. And every once in a while, it'll be very quiet in the house. You wonder where she is, and you'll see she's in a room lining them up and like if they had a graduation, a nursery graduation, so she's practicing that with them. Whatever she was doing, that they describe that sort of typical childhood play, um, and the role that it held in developing all of humans for generations into what they are, versus where this will head if they're all with the digital toys.
Pretend play is super critical, not just for our imagination and creativity, but to help us practice kind of what the roles would be in when we interact with others. What do we say? What do we do? That kind of pretending is really important for young kids because it's like them almost rehearsing and practicing how to behave, what adults are supposed to say, what kids are supposed to say. And when they play that out with their teddy bear, they're kind of going through a rehearsal for what for us as adults seems like a normal, easy social interaction. But for them, this is all new. And that practice is so important for them. Not to mention, of course, the creativity is really important for language development, for social skills more broadly, and then remarkably, the human touch, the human interaction, the soothing that we get from a human, that affects our biological development of the immune system, of our stress response systems, of the way that our brain grows and reorganizes. We just don't know yet how all that can change if we're thinking about bots. And here's the other piece that I think is important to remember. Once we got devices with social media, parents, especially parents who might not have the resources to kind of, get daycare or enroll their kids in after school activities, they tended to leave their kids unsupervised with that tablet to stay on social media because their kids were quiet for a while. I just wonder, and we don't have data on this, but I wonder what's going to happen if your child can stay occupied with a robot toy for hours on end. Might there be some families who stop having as many in person interactions with their kid because they're being quiet in the other room with the AI chatbot doll or teddy bear? So it's not just what the bot is doing with your kid, it's what are humans not doing with their kids because the
Mm,
bot has become a babysitter.
wow. And you got to wonder, with something like this at a time of an autism crisis, it's hard to imagine that this wouldn't make it worse, by degrading human to human interaction, social skill development, all because we just want shortcuts and we don't want to have to deal with them. So hey, here, sit them down in front of the bot. And the thing is, we're trusting known breakers of the social compact. So there's now a brief. It's been filed in California court. There's and a bunch of employees are on record in the brief. Meta was aware that millions of adult strangers were contacting minors on its sites. And this is before AI, but that its products has exacerbated mental health issues of teens, and that content related to eating disorders, suicide, child sexual abuse were frequently detected yet rarely removed. There were employees that actually did express disgust at the time in emails, and they were like, "Oh, good, so we're going after under 13-year-old now, and now we're doing 5-year-olds." Zuckerberg has been talking about that for a while, targeting 11-year-olds. Feels like tobacco companies a couple decades ago, like we're seriously saying we have to hook them young here. And again, they're saying it's these companies that we want to put a regulation moratorium on.
Yeah, I mean, I know that it's a divided country right now, but I think and truly believe that we can all agree that child's welfare comes first. Nothing is more important than making sure that our kids are safe, that they're not interacting with predators, that we are prioritizing their well-being over a small handful of people making a whole lot of money off of their data. I hope and believe that that's true. And when you hear that there were opportunities or choice points or decision points to choose profit over well-being, I don't know what happened in those rooms or what happened, but I am as incensed as you are about those kinds of headlines when I hear that there may have been times when profit became more important than what's best for our kids. Who doesn't want what's best for our kids?
Well, again, like you're pointing out, there's an inverse relationship between the monetary incentive of addicting kids and a desire to have them develop healthily. And this is why, I mean, a regulation moratorium is the worst thing you can do. I do want to get to your action items. How do we create a more human centered AI as sort of a tool rather than a destination? AI being a tool for humanity, not a destination in and of itself, like it's becoming. What are some regulations that you feel we need?
I think first and foremost, kids' brains are not the same as adults' brains. A product made for adults is not okay for kids. And I think that if we were really making these products with the level of attention to warning, potential risk, what we know about the human brain, what the companies know about the human brain, we would see something very different. Today, most of these products look exactly the same for an 8-year-old as they do for an 80-year-old. Let's create safety by default, guardrails. Take down cyber hate. Take down content that teaches you how to cut yourself or engage in anorexia or other eating disordered behaviors. Let's take all that down immediately. Let's think about how to put up warnings for kids to really help them understand that their data are being used. They may have clicked a button when they first downloaded an app or entered into a platform. Kids are not capable of appreciating the long-term consequences of that, especially when it's described in legal language that was written for adults. Kids need periodic reminders that every single thing that they're doing, looking, pausing as they scroll by, is being captured and sold without them having access to understanding what that is. And they're certainly not making any money on that. Let's protect kids by maybe incorporating digital media literacy into the way that we introduce them to devices before they get a device handed to them in kindergarten with no restrictions on them, or before parents give them a device. Let's make sure everyone's aware of what the current landscape looks like, which is there is not one person looking this over to ensure that these are child safe content or features or products. These are decisions being made by folks with additional motives, at least, or somewhat conflicting motives in many cases. So I think that's critical. We got to keep in mind that all of this content that's on there is being used to create child porn, to create deep fakes. It's being used by bad actors to victimize one another, even teens who are creating things to offer cyberbullying in a new worldwide way. There's a lot there that we can really do to really put child well-being first.
What about data privacy? And this is even for adults, that the AI stuff is creating an entirely new incentive for them to spy on people. I know there is a debate now whether Gmail, they're denying it, but it seems like there is some sort of default feature there that will suck in your email data into the AI, because all the companies that are providing
Mhm.
that are also dabbling in AI. And the whole point is they need, and this, ties into copyright law too. They want to grab everything. There's tons of lawsuits on this. So there's a whole panoply of regulations that we need. Um, how do we
Absolutely.
broach data privacy with the chatbot era?
I mean, personally, I don't think we should be using kids' data for anything, right? And
Mm,
AI is really tricky because with social media, let's remember that parents had probably their own social media account, kind of knew what was going on, even though their kids were going onto a new platform. Parents had some understanding. AI is different. AI is invisible. We don't even know when we're interacting with AI or what we're doing, as you say, maybe getting sucked in to an AI platform. And most parents don't understand what's happening right now. So this is all occurring without parents even having the ability to regulate it because many of them have never interacted with a companion chatbot before or know that the the software their kids are using for one purpose ostensibly is
yep.
actually just a dating mining, you know, wolf in sheep's clothing. So we really need to do a lot of education. I would also say that we desperately, desperately need research to be understanding exactly what needs to be happening here. And right now, the research that's being done is predominantly being done by tech companies with no
Yep.
need for them to disclose what they're finding. We need objective psychological scientists, for instance, to be able to do this in an independent way. There's remarkably little federal government money dedicated to this, but this is a national priority, in my opinion, to make sure that researchers have the ability to figure out what's going on, because that science is what's used to guide these policy recommendations. And we're
Yeah,
playing
and
catch up
obviously we
right
need
now.
transparency. I mean, that's
Yeah,
the number one before all of this. Like you said, it has to be known when they're data mining, when they are AI, what is a bot, and then has to be
yep,
clear, because that's just basic consumer protection laws, trade practices that we regulate really in every other industry. That you can't be giving off false pretenses that you're a human interaction, and certainly, if there is data mining, that needs to be clearly conveyed. And you have to be required to opt into any of this stuff rather than the default being the other way around. But again, it's these sorts of, I think, pieces of legislation that I know the APA and your folks there are working on, and other legislators really actually for all the division. And I'm a pretty partisan guy myself. This is actually very bipartisan. The legislation is split between the parties, and those opposing it are split between the parties. And I think the last thing you want to do now is quash that and just say, don't worry, we'll take care of it at the federal level. There's no need to have a patchwork, which sounds nice, but I think we understand the motivation is it's not a matter that they want it uniform versus not uniform. I think they don't want certain regulations, and we need to reserve that prerogative. I'll give you the last word before we sew up.
I think that's right. I think, and I am happy that this is a very bipartisan issue, that people are wanting to put kids and kids' safety first. And we want to recognize that no matter where you're coming from, and this is important, in either the political divide in our country or geographically in our country, know this: our kids in this country are currently getting the worst version of many of these products.
Hmm.
All around the world, regulations have been put into place in many different countries to put child well being first. But that at the federal level has not happened here in America. And where it's happened in states, those are under appeal and things haven't changed yet. So American kids are in many cases getting the worst version of these products compared to their counterparts around countries all over the globe.
It reminds me of the food situation. There's a reawakening about that. Addictive food, processed food with chemicals, and the contrast that others have brought forth that I didn't realize were so stark between the American version of some of these cereals versus elsewhere. And again, I do think we have obviously in America a lobbyist base of these companies that have a lot more clout here than elsewhere, and it's the same story. This is not really a right or left. It's more up or down, I'd say. So that's why there is a huge opportunity. At the same time, there is a huge vested interest in trying to squelch any discussion on this. Where could people find your research, your writings on this, your recommendations, or your colleagues at the APA?
Yep. At APA, you can type in APA Health Advisory. You will find an advisory on AI and adolescent development, on why you should not be using chatbots and wellness apps to totally replace humans for therapy. You'll find a social media health advisory as well. For my research, you can also go to the UNC Winston Center or teensandtech.org, and you'll be able to look at all of our latest research on what we're finding as we find it.
Teensandtech.org, definitely something to check out if you have a preteen and you're looking for some guidance on this, because again, ultimately, whatever government does or doesn't do, it sometimes makes it harder, but you are the ultimate regulator in your home as a parent. And I think this is something that we all of us humans, we have right and left, but I think we're more united as humans versus this like transhuman fake world. We need to go back to real, wholesome human to human interactions, and certainly appreciate your work. We'll definitely be in touch again. Happy Thanksgiving, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. You too.